don't always put blind faith in AI. It's at the mercy of proofreading, because in the exact same way that a person or a new employee might forget something that you told them, so can all of these AI tools. And I think that's often a big place where people fall down, is they kind of just assume that it's all knowing and will always get things right, but it doesn't, and that's okay. It will learn and get better with time. Hi guys, welcome back to another ProfileTree podcast episode. So this week we're going to be talking about future-proofing your business in 2026 in terms of digital strategy. I think future-proofing is probably a bit of a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. And it's kind of important to remember that it's not about ensuring that you're on top of everything at all times in terms of new trends or tools or things like that, but it's actually about putting your business in the best position to sort of survive and thrive. The first thing I wanted to talk about before even getting into different tools or platforms or things like that was the idea of your audience. So a lot of people, I think, maybe don't realize who their audience is, or they kind of just assume that their audience is whoever they happen to sell to. But in not actually understanding and correctly defining your audience, you can end up just trying to market to everyone. And then a lot of the time, what you're actually trying to do can get lost, or it's kind of fallen on the ears of people who it's not relevant to. People often also really struggle in terms of where to start whenever it comes to defining your audience. Easiest place, start right at home. Start with your existing customers. What you'll find is your ID audience is actually usually visible in the data that you already have. Look at which of your clients, for example, were the easiest to work with, or achieve the best results out of their projects, or generated the most profits. Usually knowing that will give you a really, really good baseline to start off with. And also, using analytics in terms of Google Analytics or your social media analytics, things like that, is a way to actually find the data that works for it. What would you say in terms of working directly with clients is maybe a common mistake when it comes to audiences? Like, do you see often where people don't really know who their audience is, and then that makes it even more difficult to, even kick off a project, for example?
I would say most businesses know who their audience is and know who their target market is, but they are almost afraid to kind of not admit that, but I suppose, just solely focus on that. So a big issue you'll get, a business will come in and, who's your target audience? Who do you want to sell to? I want to sell to everyone. And they know that their main customers, or 90% of their customers, are female between the ages of 30 and 50. And they'll know that because they're in the shop every day, or they're, in the business, or interacting with their own customers every day. Or even if they're at a management level, there is a lot of ways to get data that are, online, like Google Search Console, Google Analytics and that, but there's also what you call soft data, that you're getting from people who are dealing with your customers and clients on a day-to-day basis. They'll be able to tell you a lot of information about who your target audience is, or who your existing customer base is. It's different, obviously, if you want to reach out and target a new audience or something. But I would say the biggest kind of issue you will get with a lot of businesses is that they want to target everyone, and they're not kind of specifying it. Different ways that you could kind of do that, there's kind of online technical stuff that you can target, look up keywords and online information and stats and everything. But then there's also kind of the soft side of it that, you can build out the likes of customer personas or client personas, that you kind of make an example of what your kind of general customer is. So, that it's male in his, 20s who's single and lives alone kind of thing. You kind of build up person, you give them a name, you look up their hobbies and background, their education, everything, and you build a profile kind of around them. So then that kind of leads you into, what platforms do they use, say, for social media marketing. Somebody that age, male, will probably use TikTok and Twitter, whereas if it's an older person, 50 plus, male or female, they'll probably use something like Facebook a lot more. So that helps you helps you kind of focus your marketing onto the right channels. So really the thing is to kind of look at who you're selling to now and kind of their persona and the way they interact with your business. And then also, if you are looking to expand something else, try not to do the blanket, I want to sell to everyone. Try and, kind of break it down. And even if you do want to sell to everyone, start with kind of like a subset or demographic of people and target them and build upon it. There's no point in just kind of like throwing a bucket of paint at the wall and like
Yeah.
hoping it sticks.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose it's important to remember too that your audience definition may vary, and how you go about finding that may vary based on your business model. So for example, as you referenced, you might be looking at things like demographics, because you sell direct to the consumer. Obviously, if you sell directly to businesses, it might be more about focusing on things like industry or the business stage in terms of, are they a well-established business, or are they just a startup, or, what their revenue levels or budgets are. Because all of those things can vary depending on who exactly or what exactly it is that you sell. And a really good way to look at it as well is, rather than, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, rather than thinking about what you sell, think about it as, well, what problem do you solve for your customers? To look at a website agency, for example, we build websites is a really simplistic way of saying what it is that you do. But if you look at that from like an audience targeting perspective, it might be, we build websites that convert for construction companies in Northern Ireland. Do you know what I mean? So that's a really good example. And it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily put yourself in a quite a tight pigeonhole. But that can be one sort of content marketing strategy in terms of trying to target that specific audience. So I suppose if you've gotten to the point, at least, where you feel like you fully understand and you've defined your target audience, the next kind of logical thing to do is to consider all of the tools at your disposal. And one, obviously, massive one is websites. Generally, nowadays, businesses will tend to have a website, so let's assume that in most cases they do. Marcus, I wanted to talk a wee bit about the idea of website maintenance, because I think this is something that gets lost a lot. Like, very often we can see businesses making the mistake of investing thousands of pounds in a really well-designed website, and then potentially not looking at it for several years and wondering why it's not actually doing anything for them. Is this something that you see a lot, or, what would be your sort of recommendations to people that are looking at their website as a digital tool?
Indeed. So there's going to be a lot of variance depending on what type of site you have, what platform of choice that you have, in terms of what, I suppose your kind of duty of care almost is going to be in looking after and maintaining that. Almost sounds like you're talking about looking after a pet or something else in between, but you should probably treat it with that, the old kind of thing that you'll tell children at times, but yeah, treat it with that kind of responsibility. You have to, now that you have this, you have to look after and take care of it and feed it and everything else in between. But yeah, it's going to vary quite a bit. If you're on something like Shopify, for example, it's a very self-contained platform. So you don't have to worry too much from a kind of, security and maintenance angle, because of how lock and key Shopify keeps everything down. You don't got to worry as much about that, and you can instead just focus on the commerce side of things. Whereas if you are working with WordPress, for example, the stat on this varies depending on where you check, but roughly about 43% of the web is going to be WordPress, as far as what's powering most of the websites going on. So, well, this is obviously great because it means if you have a WordPress website, there's going to be lots of tools and integrations and everything available because of its popularity. It also puts a little marker on it for people who would like to target said website as well, in terms of, obviously trying to make a hack or trying to get information that they shouldn't, or anything else in between. So with WordPress websites in particular, you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping everything up to date. That's going to include anything from the WordPress core, themes, and also plugins, which are the big one, because if your website has quite a few of them in particular, it can get quite cumbersome keeping on top of them on a regular enough basis, be it monthly or every 2 months or even every quarter would be enough. Nothing any more frequent than that, I wouldn't suggest anyway. No point doing it week to week. Sometimes updates can come up that are a little bit ahead of themselves and they may cause an issue or anything else in between. So I would say at least every month is what I would recommend there. Then as far as the kind of other sides of it go, there's I would say, PHP versions, another thing to keep on top of. That's a bit more hosting specific. PHP versions kind of come and go as time goes along, and you're going to want to make sure that your website is compatible with the latest version of it. At the time, you probably want to set around 8.1 or 8.2 right now. Everything such as SSL certificates, backups, and uptime kind of monitoring, you'll be hoping that if you have a good hosting, then that'll be keeping track of that. SSL certificates are pretty easy these days. You don't have to worry too much. Website backups, ideally you want to have a hosting that has some backups going maybe, be it 14 or 30 days so that you can roll back if anything amiss happens, be it a website compromise or just a mistake while you're making edits or changes. And then uptime monitoring is quite important too, just to make sure that there isn't any frequent downtime going on your site that needs to be addressed as well. And all of this is just to make sure that you have a consistently performing website that's going to be safe and secure. You'll want to install maybe some security plugins. If you want a free one, WordFence is the easiest thing to install. More paid ones such as Solid Security are really good for making sure that no malicious bots are going to be hitting the site too much without getting a slap in the wrist and trying to keep them away. And it's all just to make sure that your website is going to be obviously trusted and reliable to users. Additionally, you don't want it to get blacklisted by Google. And just making sure that everything stays nice and secure. So a lot of variance depending on what platform of choice you may have. And once you have that kind of technical safety, then that means that you can then focus and get into the kind of content-driven side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Any thoughts from you, Park, on, from a customer service perspective in terms of dealing with clients? Are there any do's and don'ts that you would suggest when it comes to even getting at the point of purchasing a new website and things in terms of aftercare?
I suppose probably what Marcus has said, it's not a standalone, website's never set in stone. Once you build it and launch it, that's never the end of it. From, like a technical security maintenance side of things to the actual content itself on the website. Clients will spend a lot of time during like the initial build of the website. They may pay for content writing service, like ones we offer, or they may take it on themselves to do it. But then there's all this kind of time and effort spent adding content to the site, getting it, perfect. And then the site launches, and next thing, it's forgotten about for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Oftentimes until the next website is needed, that could be 4 or 5 years down the line. Not a word has changed on it. But in that time, the services offered by the business could have changed. A lot of things can actually change within the business. But from an SEO point of view, everyday keywords are changing. What people are searching for is changing. So that needs to be, I suppose, when trying to future-proof a business or your website, that needs to be almost like a regular check-in, something for, the business owner or the marketing manager, whether it's, once a month, once a quarter. Something is better than nothing, but, as frequently as you can to kind of spend some time, probably focus, on your homepage, your core pages, your main service pages. Are they up to date with, reflecting what your business still currently does? Are you doing some research on keywords so you can use like Google Analytics, Google Search Console, see what pages people are looking at, what, terms are being searched for? You can use tools like SEMrush. And then do you need to kind of refresh some of the content on those pages? Aside from that, then it's always good to be creating blog content, trying to regularly pump that out as well. You can use AI for that to kind of speed things up. It is, it can be quite a time consuming thing previously before AI. But like nowadays, you can use some really good prompts, get some training from the likes of ourselves on how to do that, and you can be constantly pumping out fresh content. That'll help keep your website, more relevant at the top of searches. So it is something that, it does require almost like feeding and regular maintenance to keep it up there. It's not a case. Your website's never finished effectively.
Yeah, it's kind of contrasting to the efforts that we might already see people putting into social platforms where, people generally have an idea already to know that, you've got to get a good schedule going to keep your posts out, keep yourself kind of in the algorithm. And it's pretty much as you described, websites are the exact same thing. As far as the algorithms that they're targeting, there's variants, there's Google, there's other search engines, there's now assistant AIs as well. So we're going to see websites potentially start showing up in them a little bit more often than what they are right now. And they're all using the exact same information as each other. So you're actually targeting quite a bit there. And I think it really kind of highlights how important having a website is and maintaining it is too, because social platforms, they're all rented space. There's nothing set in stone there. There could be algorithm changes. There could be changes in terms of policy that could completely change the audience that you're targeting just overnight, depending on how reckless all of the social media owners want to be on occasion. So all of that kind of depends. But your website, if you have that, that's something that you own 100%. It's not going to be going anywhere. What you can build up through things like email lists and what content you have on your site is always going to be quite valuable. And ideally you want to be making updates to your sites on a regular basis and keeping it fresh in the algorithms as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really good way to look at it. Is a lot of businesses are very good and consistent in terms of planning a social media schedule, but the website will, exactly like that, just kind of get lost by the wayside. When you're planning out your 6-month schedule of content, you could look at it as, okay, well, maybe I'll post a blog every other month, or maybe I'll add a new list of FAQs based on typical customer queries we've had over the last 6 months, or I'll update it with some new reviews or case studies. Like, it's a constant work in progress. And it's really important that people see it as just as important as all those other channels. And just because you're not popping up on someone's feed, as it were, it doesn't make it any less important to update it. Because exactly as you said, Porrick, chances are in 4 or 5 years, things will have changed within the business. They'll have worked with some new customers. They'll have brought in some new team members, or invested in some new equipment. That's all really, really important. And it's obviously great for PR as well. So just, I suppose, to follow on from the mention around social media, what are our thoughts on paid versus organic in 2026? I've got a statistic here. In 2016, the average search cost per clicks were generally around or generally under $1 to $2 for a lot of industries. By 2026, the average search cost per click surpassed $5. With some high competition industries, things like solicitors, accountancy firms, often exceeding $8 per click. I mean, I feel like it's a leading question, but what are our thoughts on organic versus paid content in 2026?
I mean, if you have the money and you want to spend it, you can work away, but you can get the same results for free pretty much. So, if you have money to burn, it's great. Put your money into ads and spend it and everything. There is like a nice medium, I suppose, for some businesses. But, in the long and short of it, the first 2 or 3 results in any search are paid. The rest of them, number 4 is free. So if you can put in the work, you can work on your content, work on your website. Like everything we said there, like posting blogs, refreshing your content, technical side of things, Marcus mentioned, having a fast open website, having a good UI UX setup. You can be a number 4 effectively for free, or you can pay, $8 per click to be in 3. So in my mind, it's not really a question of which you should do. There is more work in the free version, but I think there's a better payoff of it too.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's funny because people forget that even in doing paid advertising, you still do have to put a certain amount of effort into your content, because at the end of the day, if someone clicks on an ad and lands on your website and all they see is like a service menu and a couple of client reviews or something, that's not necessarily going to convert them. So you're paying literally that, as it says, you're paying for the click. You're not paying for the actual conversion. Like, that still is very much the onus is on the business to make that happen.
And that does factor into the price as well. So like Google will charge less to, a better website than it would. So say you have a bad website with bad content, it loads slow, they may charge you $8. If I have a fast loading website with good content, they may charge me $7 for that position. So you still will be paying a higher price for the ads anyway. And like what you said, once you're bringing a click person to the site, they may immediately jump back off, and that's, your $8 gone. And that may happen multiple times a day. So you still need to do the work anyway. It's just put in that bit of extra effort, and then you don't have to pay for ads.
Completely. And I don't know about you guys, but I always scroll past the ads. Like, I can't remember the last time that I searched something and actually clicked on the sponsored ad, because I think it's almost like a stubbornness thing. I'm like, oh, Google is telling me I should click on that, but I put a click on what I want to click on. And maybe if it was things like products, I'd be more likely to click on an ad. But I think for a service, I'd go to organic results.
Well, I think there's probably, as people get more, a baseline of kind of digital marketing knowledge, you kind of know in the back of your head that person's paid to be there. They may not have a great service. The person below that who's there as an organic result is actually there for a reason. So like I would be the same, that I would skip past those first three, the paid ones, because they may not actually be a good service. They're just paid to be there.
Yeah. You want to give them the kudos for being there.
Yeah, I actually have a good example of this. So, recently Mother's Day passed, and I was looking to buy a nice bouquet of flowers. And so I looked up florist, followed by the town that I live in, hoping, okay, let me see if there's what else is nearby. I know the local ones, but let me see what else is close. And the first couple of results were mainland UK websites that, were obviously then just trying to get my attention instead. Went right by them.
And then tried to find the local businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was there was a flower delivery service. It wasn't Blooming Wild, but it was one that would be quite a close competitor. And especially when I used to live in Australia, and I would send like mum or family or friends flowers on specific days, and it was great because I could just go online and have it like next day delivery. But then when I looked this time around, they no longer deliver to Northern Ireland, but they're still coming up as a localized result. And that's the really frustrating thing, is just because something's come up in the search result doesn't mean it's actually what you need, where you need. So again, organic content is key. I mean, one last thing we should definitely talk about is obviously it's ever relevant, is the influence or the impact of AI in terms of a business's digital strategy. I think you put this really well. Pork, AI is a tool, not a strategy. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so like, it's definitely probably one of the best tools, especially for anyone in kind of the marketing sphere, business owners or marketing professionals. It's such a help, especially for the likes of what you need it for, generating posts, generating content. It can take so much of like that kind of grunt work and time consuming work off your hands. But I think not to get caught up in it. It can even be used for helping you create a marketing strategy, if you have the right prompts and feeds into it. But I suppose it's not to fall down the trap of we're going to do AI. That you'll see a lot of stuff on like TikTok and stuff now. It's like companies coming in like, we're going to AI, and you're like, okay, what does that mean? What do we actually change? And there's nothing behind that. It's just we're gonna start using AI. We're gonna do AI. But there's nothing actually substantive in that. You're just doing it for the sake of it's a current trend, it's a fad, as opposed to, is it actually cutting costs? Is it making people's jobs easier and more efficient? Are you freeing up your marketing managers? Are you freeing up 8 hours a week that they would have spent writing blogs and content? That's now 2 hours because they're using AI. They have 6 more hours to they can go to trade shows, events, networking events, meet people, or spend that time on business development or spend it somewhere else productive. So it's a tool to use as part of your strategy, but it can't be the entire strategy itself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important to think of it as an assistant as well. Like, I would sort of look at my ChatGPT as like another new employee that I need to train, and I need to feed all of the exact same information into the AI that I would to a person, because otherwise how's it going to know what I need specifically? And that, whether that's the tone of voice that we need for content marketing, or whether it's all of the kind of background information to me as a person and what I prefer, my style, or the company information, like all of that's relevant. And I think people forget that without doing the work of inputting that into their AI tools, it's not going to know. It can't just magically know. So it is definitely a great tool, but you still have to, you kind of get out what you put in, don't you?
I'd say that's fair, yeah. It becomes more valuable over time the more and more that you kind of invest into it, as far as, feeding information, getting used to how to develop your prompts. It'll kind of learn around you in terms of what you're looking for as well. This can be, if you take something such as ChatGPT or Claude, for example, it'll have some learned, bit of context around every individual chat. If you create a project, then you kind of got your own isolated kind of world as well, where you can feed in different files and other bits of instructions in terms of how to interpret it. So making use of all of that to help address essentially, specific kind of needs that either you have as a business or down to each individual employee is so key. I mean, even from my side, to take a kind of working example, let's say I'm presented with a website that has some sort of error. Could be something related to a payment gateway or a form not firing. And I decide, okay, I need to go and diagnose this. Perhaps I'll look at some error logs from the server or that I can get from the application. And previously, what you would do is you would sift through and look through for minutes to hours trying to find where the problem might be. Ideally, you have a timestamp to go off of, but not necessarily, depending on how things go. Whereas now I can very quickly get one of these AI tools to sift through everything. I can explain the problem that's happening. It'll try and look and identify, because I've been feeding it information about plugins and things that we use and the hosting that I use. It knows how to interpret everything and where everything is expected to be. I don't need to expand as much, so it's getting quicker as time goes on. And within minutes now, I've got a solid assessment of what the issue is and what steps I can take next to try and amend. And I can, obviously iteratively go back and feed it more as I find things. And and that speeds that up a ton. Whereas before, I'd be spending ages having a look through lines and lines of logs. I'd be searching on Stack Overflow to hope and pray that someone else encountered the same issue that I did. Whereas now, it streamlines everything up. And, obviously I have a decent bit of trust for the information that it'll give me, but the important part then is to go and verify and check everything then yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose just to lead on from your point as well, Marcus, don't always put a blind faith in AI. It's at the mercy of proofreading, because in the exact same way that a person or a new employee might forget something that you told them, so can all of these AI tools. And I think that's often a big place where people fall down, is they kind of just assume that it's all knowing and will always get things right, but it doesn't, and that's okay. It will learn and get better with time, but you still need to have a human influence over it as well. Definitely. Another great chat, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you all next week. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast, and let us know if there's anything you'd like us to talk about next time.